Welcome back to After the Ashes, your podcast for Altadena about the recovery and all the other wonderful things that were going on. And I'm your co-host, Steve. I'm here with Shauna.
Steve, are you nervous today?
No. I'm just...
Steve's stuttering a bit. Oh, my gosh, Steve.
Well, I mean, after
Steve's a little camera shy. We're on camera this morning with a lovely background of Altadena behind us. And Steve's a little shy and nervous, which I love for him. I'm going to read the title because I love a pithy title. And this one, it goes to Steve, full credit. I was knocking around 1,000 titles, and Steve just blurted out 8 crazy nights. So this is episode 23. We are recording on the 16th of December. And this is 8 crazy nights. Welcome back.
Well, happy Hanukkah.
And happy Hanukkah.
I think tonight's night 3.
So. It is night 3. Yeah. I don't know if, I think you had a chance. Did you read the post I shared?
That was beautiful.
Thank you.
It was.
I felt like the metaphor of the light and the darkness that is Hanukkah.
Yeah.
And was just appropriate for the season that we are all in.
And that picture.
And that picture is so poignant, especially not just with local events, but world events, and especially with what had happened in Australia. Yeah. And even, frankly, Rob Reiner, which I think for any Angelino Gen Xer, seeing Rob Reiner murdered by it looks like his own kid, him and his wife, the kid's stepmother.
I thought it was his mother.
I thought it may have been his mother, but I know it's the second wife. Anyhow, I don't know why that one. I think that one hit us Angelino Gen X kids a little harder than perhaps most, especially since he's someone who should have lived to 100. But anyhow, if you haven't read the post I wrote for Hanukkah, it's on Substack. It's in the Beautiful Altadena group. It's on our Instagram. It's on our public page. You can find it. I will not make everyone listen to it now. But I will say, even if Hanukkah is not your tradition, it's a really kind of beautiful way to mark this time of year. And like I said, the season that we all find ourselves in. And if you haven't, light a candle for yourself and your neighbors and bring some light into the dark.
Indeed.
Steve, I wanted to ask, and you may know, what's happening, speaking of, Judaism and Hanukkah, what's happening with our temple? It was one of the first structures to burn.
True.
The night of the Eaton fire. I remember getting a message from one of our sheriff's deputies saying that the temple was on fire.
Yeah.
To paint the picture that, it was bad and to be prepared for what was coming.
I'm not exactly sure. At the Altadena event, there was a contingent from the synagogue, and I was talking to one of the rabbis there, Rabbi Jill, and it sounds like they're in the rebuilding process. I mean, put it up there with the club and St. Mark's School and some of the other institutions. And, those processes do take longer because there's a lot of stakeholder
agreement needed.
Yeah, input
buy-in
required. So, yeah. I mean, I get emails every now and again from the synagogue trying to figure out where we stand. So as of right now, it sounds like they're in the master planning stage because like so many of the institutions, I was at one for St. Mark's last night because my kids are alum. And as I said, I'm a recovering trustee there as well. It's a way to reimagine these institutions, the campuses and everything, not for what was. And a lot of these decisions were made piecemeal, but now because it's like a complete revamp, where do you want these organizations to go? And what is their future going to look like? And that complicates some of this process. And I think, as we were talking with St. Mark's, it was interesting. A lot of the things that we were hearing and we were talking about in the community were things we could have said about Altadena. And, one of the things we talked about in that meeting was where does St. Mark's fit in Altadena and the future of Altadena and the rebuild? And it was just a very interesting conversation because we are so into this conversation that we had a lot of insights. And so, how do you capture what was? And that's so much about what St. Mark's was talking about. And I think the synagogue, country club, a lot of the Waldorf School, a lot of these institutions that were lost, how are they going to recapture that and maintain that? And that, I think, is a broader question for Altadena itself.
It is. I mean, I know in just a brief conversation with some people at St. Mark's, some of what their concerns that they expressed off the cuff were, who are we rebuilding for?
Well, yeah,
because
and that is a question.
They don't know who's going to come back, how many are going to come back, are they going to have the numbers that they need?
Well, and I was talking to my wife about that this morning, and I mean, not to get too far into the weeds on that, but yes, St. Mark's traditionally had been, as a school, had been a major part of the community. You know, a lot of the community send their kids there. Over the last few years, the student body is shifting because of St. Mark's, what it represents and what a great program they have and what a great school it is, that we've been pulling from a lot outside the area. So it's different than it was. Like 20 years ago, probably 80% of the student body were from Altadena or Altadena adjacent. Now I think it's under 50%.
Wow.
But again, that's just me swagging it. I'm sure there are people at St. Mark's that'll say, Steve, you know, you don't know what you're talking about. But you know, because I saw it with my boys' class versus my daughter's class and the difference between the two.
Yeah, no, it's. I think the only constant is change, right?
Indeed.
And that's where at it. I think about. I'm going to go back to the temple because I think about that in the context of it being, you know, in Pasadena in particular. You know, Pasadena has historically been very Christian.
Yes.
And, you know, which is evidenced by...
We don't hold the Rose Parade on Sunday.
Yeah, correct. Which has, you know, is evidenced in the number of churches everywhere, all over the area in Pasadena, East Pass, Sierra Madre, Altadena, you know, that we don't have temples. And I remember, and so to have one temple, our temple is the only temple.
Well, it was also the community center as well. So it was not only just a synagogue, but it was also the center of Jewish life.
Exactly. And the only one that existed really in the, you know, not, I wouldn't say San Gabriel Valley because we do have some further
much
out,
smaller.
But they're much smaller. But the only thing really in this area. And I really spoke to me because, you know, I go back to the conversation I had with Bobby Chosen, the man who grew up in my home 100 years ago, and who was one of the only Jewish families in the community, and his, you know, sharing his story of there being no temple and them using a field and using even, you know, church grounds at times when they could, but a lot of things really taking place in people's homes because they needed to. And, you know, I will just wrap on, you know, again, the image of, you know, after he shared the story of his brother being married in our Jane's Cottage, and the arch, for anyone who had a Jane's Cottage or was in one, you know the arches between rooms and between the living and dining areas, and that they turned that into their chuppah, and that's where they had their weddings because there was nowhere else to do that. So I just feel like we, you know, the community got set back in a lot of ways. The Jewish community got set back in a lot of ways of working so hard to have a home.
Yes.
For Jewish life, and then not having that, and again,
it'll endure.
It'll endure and come
6,000 years of tradition.
I'm with you.
Shauna.
I'm 100% with you. But yeah, so that is that. Let's jump into our media roundup.
Yes, I know our listeners love it. I wish we could do it like Saturday Night Live does it. You know.
I know, me too. I wish we were. Well, I don't know who would be who. Who would be Che and who would be.
Well, I go back to the old Dana Carvey days and Kevin Nealon. I mean,
I was gonna say Scarlett's husband, Che, and Michael Che, and who's the other guy who does the round? Oh, Steve, you fail me.
I don't watch Saturday Night Live anymore.
Oh my gosh, it's Yost. Anyhow, but Mr. Scarlett Johansson.
Okay.
Okay, Steve. Steve, I'm going to share episodes of SNL with Steve later, and then we will retouch on this on another day.
Yet again, I fail on my cultural.
So in the media, there's a lot to cover in the media. Some of it is, you know, feel good. Some of it is good to see. Some of it was interesting. I think, Steve, you were messaging me last week, the end of last week, going, Shauna, go read the headlines, because literally there were stories in LA Times, Real Politics.
Yeah. That was a crazy day. Yeah.
Wall Street Journal. Yeah. There were stories in every one of these publications that echoed the topics and takes that we have been covering on this podcast for months. And it made both of us kind of think, well, either we have landed on something or we know who some of our listeners are.
I think it's more the former than the latter. I mean, I'd like it if it was the latter, but, you know, I'm not going to presume media actually listens to us.
I don't presume that anyone has time to listen to us, but I think maybe a little of column A and column B. And I found that to be kind of interesting. But yeah, that you know, the points that we are hitting are finally hitting some critical mass. I will say they're also hitting some critical mass with community orgs and groups as they are starting to speak up on some of the things that we've been talking about for months. I've said before, I felt like Chicken Little running around like everybody, the sky is falling, and no one was listening and thought I was a crazy person.
Can I continue our theme with the Hanukkah celebration? I feel like I'm wandering in the desert all by myself, you know?
Oh, will there be a burning bush in here or no?
I
Sorry.
don't know,
You can always count on me to bring the 12-year-old to the table.
I will say that it's funny. I've talked to, just as an aside, some folks in the electeds, and I've said, it would be really interesting in this day and age where we're really trying to find leaders that believe that it's almost like a Moses moment in some respects, where it doesn't, there was a great article by James Carville this week, and he was writing about Jasmine Crockett down in Texas and how she committed cardinal rule number 1 in politics, which was she made the campaign about herself. And I feel like that's so it's happening so much now in politics that, those involved in causes are making it about themselves, not about the cause itself. And, sometimes.
And we're going to talk about that today in the next episode.
But that's the thing about Moses, is that Moses knew he was never going to see the promised land.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes right now, I feel like our country and our political environment, whether it's Altadena, whether it's California, whether it's federal, we need that Moses moment where you're not worried about actually going into the promised land. It's just about, we just need that leadership.
We just have to get there.
Yep.
It's the leadership to even try to get there.
And it's a metaphor, folks. I'm not talking about Moses literally wandering through the desert for 40 years. But it's a great parable, because I think you think about some of the great historical figures in our country who never got to see the end of their cause. Think about Lincoln, think about Roosevelt, think about Kennedy. All three of them were never, and I'm not saying people need to be assassinated or killed or die in office, but I'm saying that we remember them for what was so great about them, which was they brought us to that point that we needed. And I think it's a humility that goes along with also the confidence to do it. So anyway, that's an aside. I apologize.
Don't apologize. I think it's a very poignant take on where we are right now. It does feel like we've been wandering through the desert for at least 20 years, and I think we've probably got at least another 20
I got a good one on this one. I just thought of this one. And what did they get in trouble for? Worshipping a golden calf. Who has everything decked out in gold?
Boom, Trump.
Yeah, I couldn't help myself.
I know. You can't. It's true. It's too. It just writes itself. It just lends itself
to exactly
It writes
that.
itself,
Yeah.
so we can't help ourselves. What else was in the media this week? This week in particular, if anyone caught the cover of Inc. magazine, if you don't know Inc. Mag is really fantastic, for business, especially if you're a small business owner.
INC, not INK for those tattoo-wearing people.
Oh, yes. Inc. as in incorporated. It is fantastic. I've actually been featured in there many years ago.
Then of course it's fantastic, right?
When I was doing my little entrepreneurial thing. But on the cover this month, which is amazing, is Emecka from Rhythms of the Village.
That is awesome.
And talking about community rebuilding and community building within rebuilding. And I was really, really happy to see his face on the cover of the magazine representing the town. I couldn't think of a better person to do that on that stage. So that was really fantastic to see. And I think outside of that, I know we've been both tackling and number of community organizers and leaders tackling all of the media interviews that are coming up.
Yeah.
Because as everybody is kind of getting their thoughts in order and organized around how to talk about the 1-year anniversary and where we're at as a town and where we're at as fire survivors and as community organizers and what's happening and what isn't and what's working and what's not. Steve knows I spent a couple hours yesterday with someone from The Economist having that conversation. I'm grateful that publications like that are still
especially if they want to go long form on this.
Yes,
because I think that's what's missing from a lot of this conversation. I think Justin Moreland did a great job in Time, not because he featured us, but because I think that was a great piece that gave a longer lens. And he sort of set the tone for these conversations that are coming. And the fact remains, the Times, we've talked about this in our media discussions in the past, but the Times and Times in particular has done a fantastic job here telling the day-to-day stories, but the newspapers are not really designed for long form. And we still need to have that long form narrative to look back at the year and say, okay, what are the lessons learned? What are these things? How do we take what's been created by the Times, by Politico, by these entities, and use that to see the arc of the history that's occurring,
No, I agree.
And I think because that's what historians do is they look back and then they try to draw the
conclusions,
figure out the
themes.
patterns and the themes and use those themes to tell the story. And
exactly.
And that is your primary document.
I wish we had Heather
media.
Cox Richardson
You have me.
I know.
I'm not a PhD or a
You're
professor
not. I know.
yet.
I know. I love reading her. You know, on the days that I'm not going to slip my wrists. Or, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that with any kind of levity. But you know, some of that material. Oh, it's heavy, and it's when you dig too deep and read it daily, it's mighty depressing. But it is what we need right now. So I was going to share with you and all of our listeners that when I went to meet The Economist, they'd wanted to meet at another coffee shop. And I was like, no, let's go to Highlight Coffee because I wanted to go to Highlight. I haven't been there in a while. And I was very happy to see the proprietor, Frank Kim, was there. Frank is another one I've known since long before Altadena from another life. But let me tell you that I had, at Frank's suggestion, the pineapple lime espresso tonic, and I'm one of those people who like the kind of like the TikTok dirty Coke thing. Steve is looking at me blank, like he has no idea what I'm talking about.
Social media is bad. I have to lead by example with my children.
I'm glad someone is doing it. One of us has to do the dirty work and be in the social media. It's me, at least sometimes, because it fatigues me too. But oh my gosh, that thing was so good.
All right.
It was amazing. Like I don't get
pineapple
into that kind of
lime
thing.
espresso tonic.
Yes, and he will make it decaf or half calf so that if you don't get too wild with it, but it was delicious.
I mean, come on, you got the pineapple and the lime. You're gonna get wild.
It was so good. So if you are over in that area, he has like an orange coffee that is kind of the cult favorite there, but this is definitely a runner-up. It was so good, especially if you want something cool. In fact, I want it right now. I left my coffee at home today, guys, and it's all I can think about.
And this is her on no caffeine, folks.
I drink generally. I drink half calf or decaf. I just enjoy coffee, but I don't need the caffeine. This is how I wake up, and I had 9 hours of sleep last night, so watch out.
All right.
So I think it'll be really interesting to see how all of these headlines wrap up.
Yeah.
I'm really interested to see come January what various publications and journalists' takes are.
Yeah.
I know there's been a lot of focus on these kind of feel-good stories. I've helped with a few and sent a few of our small businesses in the direction of a few so they could be featured. But I'm really keen to see what happens post January 7, when we can actually get back to some of the meteor stories, some of the things like what we've talked about on past episodes here of like the real death toll, for example, after the fire, and how many people have been lost, who are not in that 19 official count here, because they've been lost, to mental health nightmares and sadly to suicides, or even to, associated illness, like the person in our community who we lost to COVID, or a complication of COVID because she contracted COVID while at an evacuation center. So yeah, I think I look forward to seeing some of those heavier stories too. But for now,
it's nice to have the nice light
a little
stories.
levity.
Indeed.
A little levity. So on the note of levity, let's move into something that is entirely not light. Let's talk about the county dropping their little CRD EIFD first financial meeting on Monday.
The financial hocus pocus.
Yes, it is hocus pocus. On Monday night this week, and they did that in downtown LA. I'm sorry I said Monday night, but it's actually Monday at 10 a.m.
At 10 a.m. in the middle of the workday.
Yep, when most people could not be there, and again with very little reference, very little promotion. It's one of those things, again, it's so frustrating that people are just starting to kind of figure out what's going on when it's already happened.
Yes.
I know. You and I have been, hollering about this for some time, but for a lot of people, they're just kind of, waking up and cluing into this. It looks like the two people who have been tasked with being the quote unquote community representatives for community oversight are Wilberta, from the local NAACP, and she has also a fantastic background and accolades of her own beyond that, and her own work background. And then John, and I forget his last name, but John, who's the president of Las Flores Water.
Right.
And
so
we'll talk
one
about
of the true
that.
beneficiaries of the
this.
CRD.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, but again, to what degree those are community stakeholders in the truest sense, I think is very questionable.
Well, it's
where are the fire survivors in this? I know Steve's has a blank look on his face of like they're not here. That's where.
Well, look, in this respect, the supervisor protected Altadena because 3 of the 5 people involved in the CRD are going to be Altadena related or Altadena adjacent. So that's a good thing. Thank you, Supervisor, for doing so.
And to refresh, actually, for anyone who's listening and doesn't recall, or if this is your first time popping in, the CRD is the Climate Resiliency District.
It's SRP CRD.
That's what it is. That was voted in via, or rather not voted in, because there was no vote and it was done behind closed doors, which has been a lot of the frustration ongoing. But this was brought to us by 782. So, and everyone is wondering, hey, what was 782?
Yes, the bill that I was very much against.
We were both very much against. It's the bill I went up to.
You did.
Sacramento with Serena to try and, at least go on public record that Altadena was not consulted, and this is not how we wanted to fund our recovery because it is woefully insufficient
and there's no
unnecessary because there's no protest feature.
Yep.
And just to refresh everyone, it's like the only thing this bill did was eliminate the protest vote and
expand the district by 20% because that was supposed to increase the tax base that we were supposed to pull from.
Right. Well, it was supposed to include Pasadena, La Cañada, Sierra Madre.
That's what everybody was sold.
Correct. That's the bill that we were sold. And guess what? That's not what we got.
So
it's all Altadena, rebuilding Altadena. So even though it is largely,
at least they safeguarded our money.
Yeah. Largely, and not much of our money, because remind me how much, what is it supposed to pick up? Like $100 million between now and 2070?
No. It's supposed to be $2 billion.
But between now and 2070.
They have to get to the $2 billion. I mean, I've heard numbers in between 60 to 100 billion.
And 2070.
Yep.
So, yeah.
60 to 100 million, not billion, sorry.
Exactly. It's not billion. 60 to 100 million, and that is, again, across the next 45 years.
There are no comments.
Yeah.
This is designed to go. This is one path, and those who have been reading my Substack know that
we have other paths.
There are other paths to get there.
We choose. But here's what I thought was kind of interesting. I had a group send me their comment because even though people couldn't attend this meeting, those who are aware of it, some did submit public comment. And one of those groups was the Altadena Village Partners. And for anyone who is not familiar with Altadena Village Partners, a relatively new group, a grassroots volunteer org of design and planning professionals advocating for community-led design of Altadena's commercial corridors. So they had a number. They have a multi-page comment here that was very well thought out and structured, but they very specifically spoke to the fact that there was no official designee for questions and follow-up from the public, no individual named, no contact information for the public to call or email or visit with questions regarding this infrastructure financing plan. The meeting notice was not posted 10 days in advance, even though it was supposed to be. The plan, the IFP, the infrastructure financing plan, was not posted 30 days in advance of the meeting as it was supposed to be. The details of each project, the location and cost were missing entirely. And so, it was like, therefore, it's unclear if there's a draft plan because there are no project details. And, they go into cite a number of state government sections that would pertain to all of this. They get into the fact that, the boundary map is hard to read. The cost to build. Table 1, not the cost to build the EIFD. It is the amount being generated by the VLF property tax and IFD bonds over 45 years. Thank you so much for calling this out. So again, I'm glad that people are finally starting to wake up. And this goes on for pages because there's just so much that is problematic with this as it stands right now.
But can you stop it?
Nope.
So the county can just take the hits and just keep on going.
And keep going because here we are. We still
allowed it
seem
to go.
to have, we allowed this and we still have, no real voice in any of this.
Yep.
Yeah. And no leadership speaking on our behalf.
Thank you, community groups. Okay.
I know. So that's it. That's the latest, and we'll continue to cover that as that develops. But that is it. And speaking of things that are developing, let's talk about the water wars, the ongoing water wars. So last week,
we're not talking about the Colorado River, folks.
Not yet. So last week we introduced in one of our episodes, the 3 Altadena water mutuals and how
Yeah.
those overlap, and because they
Chinatown
literally
in the
overlap.
foothills,
It is
baby.
Chinatown in the foothills. And we were talking about specifically, what the need for consolidation, their financial insolvency, the lack of infrastructure that is required for the coming, not just for the rebuild, but for the coming densification, and how this was actually going to all come together. So since we recorded that episode, I had a conversation with a couple of folks on the Municipal Water Board off record that provided some very interesting background that perhaps one day I will be able to share in more depth. But we also had a meeting scheduled, an emergency shareholder meeting on the quote-unquote fire recovery charge that Las Flores Water in particular proposed to charge all of the homeowners to try and get themselves, into some sort of solvency to make it through the next few years. So in a nutshell, what Las Flores is asking for is for every homeowner to pay $3,000. And I should add, this is the secondary plan. The primary plan was a property lien on everybody, and that would have been received so well. So they shifted to this, which is a $3,000 charge. The $3,000 charge, in theory, would be refunded to us if they have a recovery that is sufficient from the SCE lawsuit, which kind of boggled.
So you're fronting them money.
Correct. We're fronting the money because they have no other financial plan. And, they got into the fact that they're not eligible for any loans because they have, terrible financials, and their cash flow is terrible because they're looking at approximately 20% of regular bill payers actually in the area paying bills right now. I think this is largely not helped by the fact that some members of the community have already shared that they are receiving water and are not receiving bills because Las Flores is so wildly understaffed because they are financially insolvent that they're not even correctly billing. And there are actually people in the community offering to volunteer their time to fix this. I can't get started on that, but that is where we are at. That is what a shit show this remains to be. And I don't mean specifically Las Flores or specifically the water situation, but just in general, everything about this rebuild is just by the seat of the pants. Nobody knows what's going on. No one is in charge. It is a hot mess. So this meeting last week that actually got some pretty good traction and looked to be, record attendance for a shareholder meeting because it was well publicized and it was being talked about within a number of community groups.
It was done in the community as opposed
Correct.
to downtown at
And
10
it was
o'clock.
correct. It was,
And you didn't have to pay for parking.
That's right.
Okay.
So it was being held at the Altadena Library. So we got word less than an hour prior to that meeting that it had been canceled. As I was getting in the car with my girlfriend, who also lost her home in Altadena, who's currently displaced in Orange County, who had driven up for it. So we're getting in the car together to go, and I was like, guess what? It's not happening. So I was like, we're still going because all paths on that night were going to lead to Good Neighbor Bar and the Eagles Hall, but that is another anyways. So that plan was not going to be diffused. But I was like, no, we're going by the library because I want to see if they're there and I want to see their faces when I ask some hard questions. It's really easy to read. It's easy to be somewhat disingenuous in an email, in writing, and far less so when someone's looking you in the eyes. So I just wanted to see for myself because the party line that was delivered was that they could not hold this meeting because of a scheduling issue with the library. I work closely with the library. I'm the community at large member on, a Measure Z, our tax, another property tax that we all voted in. We did get to vote on that to do capital improvements to our libraries, of which Bob Lucas has done. And early next year, the main library will be closing and will be going under its major refurb, of which the timing, it turns out, is quite good. But anyhow, all of that to say, I couldn't believe that the library would fuck this up. But the library did actually, I saw our library director, and she said that, in fact, that it was a newer staffer's error, that they were very apologetic for, that this was scheduled on a one night that they are not open late, and she was there only because, she was missing another meeting to hang out to be sure that that the water company could stay to meet and greet with people who, of course, didn't hear that this was canceled, because who's going to get that message at the 12th hour like that. And so we ended up having a little bit of a conversation. And it was interesting to learn, not surprisingly, that Las Flores was, unlike a couple of the other water mutuals, wildly underinsured. That there's no plan for infrastructure for densification. They punted that to the county, but as we know, the county has no plan on that front either.
Or maybe they do have a plan, we just don't know about it.
Maybe they do, who knows? And then they'll just tell us after they spring it on us, and it makes no sense, and we can
it's
take
not
it.
like we can protest it.
But, and outside of that they were very open to this concept of consolidation with the other water companies. So is Lincoln. Lincoln is on board with them. It sounds like Rubio, who is far more financially solvent than the other two, and much more savvy. If you look at their pretty print materials, they're light years ahead of the other water companies that are kind of in the Stone Age. I was sharing privately with Steve that this is the only bill I've ever had in my adult life that I would blow. And because for years after I moved into my home, they had no online pay option, no auto pay option, nothing. It was take a check in every month. And guess what? A lot of months I blew that because nobody does that anymore. And I would be like, oh, it's time to pay when I get the notice on my door that I didn't pay. Which is not the way, but that's just all to say these guys have been so kind of behind the times. And as I understand it, in part, that's by design because it helps keep the water rates low and that makes community members happy. And that's how they've operated. But, we are now
Welcome to the
in a
21st
pickle.
century.
And these guys need financing options and they need to get creative with it because all they're looking at is loans or, the party line when I spoke with them was like, we'll get public money if we all consolidate. We can get money from the county and the state. And I was like, but what money? Because there's no money.
You mean the $18 billion deficit
Exactly.
that we're going to have and the county's $4 billion? I mean, either they have the money or they don't. But they don't have the money to spend, but they have the money to loan.
Correct.
Okay. Look, the reality is this, as I've said it from the start back in April, that the best course of action, I still think, for the municipal water companies is some form of recapitalization. Yeah. And there are ways to do that don't require debt, don't require borrowing from the county or the state or any of that stuff and then turning over your authority to them. And it's a question of whether or not they want to get creative and find other solutions. There are options. It's just a question of whether people want to go down those roads.
Indeed. And
because,
that is the question.
I just...
They need to go down this road because what other road are they going down?
They can go down the road they're going down now, and they just continue to let the county take over the town, and that's just where it's going. Yep.
So let's, on that cheery note, let's wrap it up with our small biz shout out. I want to... in our desperate attempt to keep this episode under an hour, we try so hard. We'll see how we do on the final time with this one. But I wanted to talk today about Little Red Hen. For those who are not familiar with Little Red Hen was a fantastic little diner. Yep, top of Fair Oaks, just south of Altadena Drive. That was operated by Barbara Shea, and that has been a spot that's been in business since 1946. It is the longest running Black woman-owned business in Altadena and one of the longest running, frankly, in the country. And it was a pretty incredible spot that we got to call part of our community, and it was obviously very important to our Black community. I used to love to pop in there for, everybody loved the special, but I would go for the shrimp and grits, which were gluten-free. I loved them. They were fantastic. As you can imagine, that business was lost to the fire, like so many. And there was a great Spectrum News feature on them in August, going over the fact, that they, like so many, do not have the funds required to rebuild. They are dependent upon and reliant upon grants and, crowdsource funds because, for them to have to take a loan to rebuild would be catastrophic for them. They would be able to operate. Like so many food and beverage businesses, you're able to operate because you own the building and you have low overhead. And if you don't, it's really tough to operate that kind of spot at the prices they were charging. Okay. Those kind of community places, it's nearly impossible. So if they had the added overhead of a loan, that just, it's like out of the frying pan and into the fryer. So they have a GoFundMe that I was noticing had not had a donation in about 5 months. The last donation was 5 months ago. Like so many GoFundMe accounts, so many people in the community, both individuals and businesses, that are desperately underfunded, desperately need help, and there haven't been donations in months because everyone's moved on, and so many outside of our sphere believe that, we got all this fire aid money that, as we know, we didn't get, and
that will be the next
in
episode.
the next episode.
Don't get me started.
Yep. But the bottom line is, that campaign, they're at 87,000 of 400,000 needed. And they actually had a secondary campaign on Give Butter where they're at $1,000 of donations. So needless to say, that is, they probably got, about 20% of what they need to get there, 20 to 25%. And they need a lot of community help. I believe I saw something about them at the Rose Bowl recently, and I couldn't find anything, unfortunately, to share that it looked like there was another kind of fundraising thing happening. But bottom line, you can go find their GoFundMe. And if you're, a private donor looking for something good to do with your dollars at the end of the year, go drop them there, because that is a neighborhood institution that we need to be able to have come back. Yep. So on that note, one more episode.
And then we're off
before the holiday break and the anniversary mental health break. And until next time.
All right. I'm Steve.
I'm Shauna.
Happy holidays. Happy Hanukkah.
Beautiful Altadena.
All right.
And
Alta Policy Wonk.
Indeed. You know where to find us. As
Indeed.
always, questions, comments, any topics you'd like covered, beautifulaltadenaog@gmail.com. We'll see you next time.
Bye now.